Welcome to Parsha with Purpose, where each Parsha becomes a guide to living with meaning, serenity, and joy. In this week's Parsha, we meet a young girl, Miriam, standing quietly on the banks of the Nile, watching a small basket drift on the water. The Torah tells us simply, his sister stood from afar to see what would happen to him. At first glance, this doesn't seem like such a dramatic moment. She didn't jump in. She didn't rescue him. She didn't change the decree. She just stayed. And yet, Chazal tell us that because Miriam waited there, later when Bnei Yisrael were in the desert, they waited for her for 7 days when she was forced to remain outside the camp. And this is an example of Hashem's justice, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. But why? What was so extraordinary about this moment? To understand, we need to zoom out. Miriam lived at a time when despair made sense. Pharaoh had decreed that every Jewish baby boy be thrown into the Nile. Thousands had already been murdered. Hope felt foolish. The future looked sealed. Even Amram, Miriam's father, one of the greatest men of the generation, gave up. He divorced his wife, reasoning that it was better not to bring children into a world destined for death. And when he did this, others followed. The Gemara tells us that Miriam, a child, stood up to her father and said, "Your decree is worse than Pharaoh's. Pharaoh only takes from this world. You are preventing souls from ever existing at all." And he listened. He remarried Yocheved. Others followed, and Moshe was born. But then came the moment of the basket. Moshe was placed into the Nile, and suddenly Miriam's prophecy seemed to be unraveling before her eyes. Her father, who had once kissed her and told her she was right, now said, "What happened to your prophecy?" And that is the moment the Torah is describing when it says, "And his sister stood from afar." She did not walk away. She did not shut down. She did not despair. She stayed. Not because she knew what would happen, not because she had a plan, but because she refused to let go of hope. Miriam's heroic faith and resilience gave courage to the nation and saved them from discouragement and despair. The Ishbitzer Rebbe explains that hope is not just an emotion. In halacha, if a person loses an object but does not give up hope of finding it, it still belongs to them. The moment they give up hope, the connection is severed. Hope is what keeps something alive. As long as you hope, redemption is still possible. As long as you hope, healing is still possible. As long as you hope, the story is not over. Miriam's greatness was not that she saved Moshe with her hands. It was that she refused to let go of the future with her heart. And because she did that, she held open the door of Geula for an entire nation. Years later, when Miriam herself was forced to remain outside the camp, Hashem commanded the entire nation to stop and wait for her. Why? Because this woman once stood still when everything told her to move on. She waited when despair made more sense than faith. She believed that salvation could come in a blink. And now, the nation would learn that lesson from her. Don't panic, don't rush on. Don't assume the story is over. Wait, trust, hold on. This week I saw a very offensive cartoon that was in the Sydney Morning Herald mocking people for speaking up after the Bandai terror attack and implying Netanyahu is behind it all. And I have to admit, my first reaction was despair. But then I thought of Miriam, who teaches us something eternal. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not fix, not solve, not control, but stay. Stay with hope. Stay with faith. Stay with the belief that Hashem is still writing the story. And that is a lesson worth stopping an entire nation for. Good Shabbos.